He's right there.
Welcome to the Bucktails Podcast. I'm your host, Eli Self. Here, hunters tell their stories. Thank you for listening.
Well, pick his head up. Pick his head up. His head up. Yeah! Look at that. Woo! Good deer, babe.
Welcome back to the Bucktails Podcast for episode 2. This is your host, Eli Self. I've got with me today Evan Bafile. A little bit of background on how I know Evan. Evan is, I think, 4 years high school basketball at Lumpkin County. They were pretty good back in the day. But also my wife's sister is good friends with Evan's sister. So we've hung out, as a friend group for a while.
Evan's wife.
Evan's wife? Yeah. What did I say?
Sister,
wife, whatever, shut up. Anywho, my wife's sister is friends with Evan's wife. Sue me. Alright, so we've hung out as friend groups, but funny story, when I first started hanging out with Evan, he swore that I hated him, the first few times. He told me not long ago, actually, that he thought I hated him, so I guess I have that, I guess I have that look about me, that facial expression, as if I hate him, but I don't hate him. I tell him I do, but I don't. So, Evan, tell me a little bit about your hunting background, how you got started hunting, all that kind of stuff.
I got started in a young age with my dad and lived out in the middle of nowhere and just kind of went through the woods and grew up doing that kind of stuff and definitely fell in love and have a hot burning passion for it. But, seeing it's kind of cool that you're doing this because you see something on Facebook and you really want to see how did he do it, what did I do that he didn't do, and kind of the whole process, and now you can just sit there and tune in and listen to it. So this is kind of cool having a local, something you can turn into, tune in on.
Yeah, and actually, the story we're going to talk about today is a big reason why I wanted to start the podcast. So to backtrack a couple of weeks here, I was at our hunting club out of town. We're, about 2 hours away. On the way down there, I get a phone call from Evan, and he said he shot the buck he's been after. Shot it. He thinks it's a great shot. And I'm, so I'm excited. I want to go help him find it. I want to go over there and,
And this whole conversation took 10 minutes because Eli had terrible service.
Yeah, it was awful. He kept on calling me back. I would lose service.
Terrible service.
Yeah, it was awful. He kept on calling me back. I would lose service. I'd call him back. We finally got the conversation out. But anywho, he wanted to go and, he was about to get down and go start looking for the arrow, looking for the blood trail and all. And I was on my way out of town. So later on that night, I keep on waiting to, I told him, send me a picture, let me know when you find it. And those texts never came through. And then Evan finally texted me and said, hey, we lost the blood trail as I went into the river. And he's like, I have no idea where it is, can't find it. So I'm like, crap. So I was dying to come back up and help. If we ended up staying just to hear the story and wanted to find out if he was going to find it. So anyways, the next day, I finally get a picture of the buck from Evan. So I knew he had found it. I was dying to hear the story. I wanted to hear, what happened. So that's a big reason why I started the podcast and why he is my first guest on the show. Because I wanted to hear the story, and so now we're going to share the story with you for Evan's buck. Have you named the buck? Did you have a name for it?
No, I have not, because he started showing up maybe 2 weeks before the season. Never seen. I hunted this spot last year, all small deer. I didn't harvest a single deer over there. I just kind of more observed. I didn't harvest a single deer over there. I just kind of more observed for next year. And he started. He came out 2 weeks before the season, and he kind of came one day, was gone 4 days, came back, and he was not consistent at all until probably right the first 2 or 3 days in. He started coming at night, and then because every day I worked, he was there broadside to my stand for 2 or 3 hours, and couldn't ever figure him out. So I took a Friday night off, which usually at the restaurant's one of our busiest days, and I took it off, and that's when I killed him. So I knew he knew my work schedule pretty good. But yeah, he was coming with a group of 3 or 4 different 8-pointers, which are young deer. And that first morning, I said there's a bunch of bears, and I started getting real nervous about them spooking the deer off and kind of messing it up. And so the other bucks started coming back out, and I'm trying to think. Well, actually, a couple coming back out, And I'm trying to think. Well, actually, a couple days prior, when I was climbing this stand, I think I saw a glimpse of him at the bottom of the hill bedding down. So I kind of got up in this tree, and which I'm sitting in a tree maybe 3 inches wide. So if I grabbed my phone out of the pocket, it felt like a wind blew by and about knocked me out of the stand. So that day, about 5 o'clock, and a bunch of deer started coming out. I mean, it just felt like every deer in the woods was where I was. And I had all the bucks that he started hanging out with the first of the season showing up. And they came as soon as I got in the stand. So they were in front of me for at least 2 hours. And I mean, sitting there and just cruising. They laid down, stood there, and like it was their home and had no idea I was there. A couple more fawns showed up, and it was like 3 fawns came walking to my right. And I didn't think, no, I figured there'd be just their mama behind them. So I just kind of quit paying attention to them. And I just kind of looked back right there. There's 3 fawns that walk out, and he was right behind them, that I would never thought he'd come out. I mean, it was almost where I walk in from the house. So I just would never guess he'd come that way. But so I posted a video of me shooting that deer, and it was only 3 minutes, but by the time he was underneath me, it took me like 15 minutes to shoot him. So by that time, I was shaking. 15 minutes to shoot him. So by that time, I was shaking like a leaf, because that was my biggest deer with a bow. And so he came, and it was just the hardest part was there's so many deer, there's so many eyeballs looking at me trying to pull back, and I was in such a little stand that I was like, no, there's no way. And they kept bouncing. That one buck took off to the left, and he looked down, and I pulled back, and I was maybe holding back for 8 seconds, and I shot, and which I shot a little further back than I really intended on, and I thought I was just nervous. I was just, oh man, I don't care. I knew I hit good. And that's when I got out of the, and he'd be like, what? And I'd be like, so it took like 10 minutes. I think he's the first or second person I called, and it took like, oh man, it took forever trying to spit it out, and I'm shaking trying to get it out, and I was like, I ran to the top of the hill to try to get service, and so needless to say, I thought I hit that deer pretty good. I knew I double lunged it, and he took off straight down the hill, and I said, that deer's 70 yards max. Got out, went up there and called a few buddies, and it was probably about an hour by the time we waited. And so we went down there, and I looked at the blood, and it was straight, bright, bubbly blood. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Perfect, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, okay, that deer's no, like, oh, okay, yeah.
Perfect, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, okay, that deer's no way I shot him with a Rage Trypan, which some things are gnarly. But, so we started looking. We never did have to bend over, maybe like twice when it started getting to the end. Never did have to look for blood. I mean, it was pouring out both sides. It was like a 2-foot trail. Say, oh, I can smell it getting close to it. Nothing. And my buddy was like, you can't smell it. So we tracked this deer for maybe a little over a mile. And he'd go down the hill, all the way back up, down the hill, all the way back up. And it was a steep hill. I mean, it wasn't no easy walk. We kept following it, and I started hearing that river, and a couple days prior, there was that big rain. So we got down the bottom of the river, and I could hear it coming down hard. And I said, oh gosh, I was praying that a deer was laying right before that river. But we was following that blood trail. It looked like he went full speed and jumped into that river. And there was no way, if he was on the other side, that I would have probably gotten him to go get him.
Right.
So I was like, dude, my heart sank. I was like, dude, this is my biggest deer with a bow. And I knew I shot it good. And so we walked that riverbank, and we couldn't find him. I said, well, we'll just go look down the river and on the next couple of days, see if we see buzzards or something. So I got out, and well, not just got out, we hiked out. Like it was a point to where we was hanging on trees trying to get out of where we was going. Got out, and the neighbor down the road, he shot a buck too. All right, well, let's just meet up in the morning, take his kayak out, kind of where he saw his, and maybe, because in my mind, I was like, I know we're not going to find my deer. I was like, there's no way.
Yeah, river's up. I was afraid for you. I remember texting you. I'm like, the next day, I'm like, get out there, get in a kayak or get an inner tube, float down, walk down, whatever. If you don't have permission to get in, I'm like, get in the river, float down, and just see if you can spot the deer. I was afraid for you. I really was.
But yeah, that like in my mind, I knew I wasn't going to find that deer. I kind of had to cancel that out. But so that night I got home, and I think I watched that video of me shooting a deer 100 times. ran a whole shooting a deer 100 times, ran a whole phone battery dead, just trying to. I don't know. I mean, I did shoot like 6 inches back where I was aiming. I could not figure that out. But I thought I had the nervous jerks.
Yeah,
and,
probably just had the jitters, yeah.
And I was like, I still know I hit the lungs. And I was like, that's what making me feel good. So we went the next morning, met with him about 7:15, 7:30. Went down the bottom of the hill. He put his kayak in. Went up. He probably went up from where he thought his was. He probably went up 100 yards. And I hear my phone ring. I couldn't see him anymore because you could not walk the banks. He says, "You want the good news or bad news?" I said, "What's the bad news?" He said, "I don't know how I'm going to get your deer out of here." And I said, "Oh, you found it?" He said, "Good news, I found your deer." I said, "Are you serious?" He said it was floating upside down. Just his back end was sticking out.
Wow.
Right before it got deep. And I was like, that was a blessing from God. I said, there's no way. And like a lot of you deer hunters, dude, you're not going to find it almost. Yeah. And so I just completely blew my mind. So I jumped in and waded up and got to him, and that river was cold. That was like belly deep, and I was freezing. And that deer was double lung, so he was filling up with water trying to get across. That was double lung, so he was filling up with water trying to get across the creek, and he was getting heavy. So, and I was dragging him where his head was underwater. So I knew if I let go, there's no way I'd find that deer. So the other dude jumped out, and we threw him on the kayak, and we kind of waded him back and took the ATV and got him out. He's going to go down the river and see if I can find his. He went down the river, called me again. He says, "You want the good news or the bad news?" I'm like, "Good news." He said, "I found my deer." I'm like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, I said, "What's the bad news?" He's like, "It looks like it's even worse spot than yours." I'm like, "Oh, God." So we waded out there again, and we got his deer out, but that just goes to show, don't ever give up looking for a deer. Because in my mind, I woke up tired that morning. I said, I'm not even going to go. And then I was like, you know what? Let's just go see if we maybe find his. So that was a blessing from God with that deer in my mind. Sure.
So how far do you think it floated down, or how far did it move down the river?
From where I shot it, because you couldn't really walk up that river too much because that bank was insanely steep. Mm-hmm. So if I had to guess where it went in and where it floated down to, it's probably about 150 yards, 200 yards.
Gotcha.
So I think he went across the river, and he was trying to get, that bank was steep all the way down. There was no easy spots to get up, and I think he tried to get up, sit back down, and tried to get up, and he worked his way all the way down. But if he would have been another foot out, there's no way we could have found him, because it was on that river bank, and that was super lucky. Because when I was carrying him across the river, he was maybe 6 inches under the water, and I couldn't see him when I was dragging him. So that's
and the river was like chocolate milk too. It was dirty, so not clear water.
Fast.
So, you're right. If it would have sank, it would have been, you may have found it, 2 weeks later and you're ruined. But
Lake Lanier,
go down to Lake Lanier and you might find it. No, so that is a incredible story, and that's again one reason why I want to start the podcast is because of the recovery story on this deer. Mm-hmm. And I know you probably had a sleepless night that Friday night.
Oh yeah.
Not knowing for sure, feeling good about the shot, you can't find it, and that's one thing I always tell people is I love blood trailing deer, but I hate blood trailing mine. If I shot it, I'm always dissecting. I'm like, did I make a good shot? Like, I thought it sounded good. I felt good about it. Now, like other people's deer, I can stay positive. I'll stay on it. I'm like, no, we're going to find it. We're good. If it's my deer, I'm like, oh, I'm terrible. I missed him.
I'm hanging the bow up. I'm not videoing anymore. See what I do wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
But that the video really helped me because I could watch what I was doing wrong, and I could tell I had the nervous shakes. But I wish I wouldn't have shot it so far back, because I thought he was cool. He found the deer. It was straight. I barely clipped both lungs on backside, and maybe that was just me, or maybe I don't know. But I was lucky, to be honest. That's basically the whole story's luck.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's the first story I shared on the podcast was a story of luck. Kill a deer walking out, but that's a little bit of skill, a lot of luck, things have to fall right. But
I'd rather be lucky than good.
Oh yeah, for sure. So back to the deer, details on the deer. It was a 7-pointer, right? Mm-hmm. Had a split G2 on one of the sides. Did you get it scored yet?
I have not. Actually, it's a good thing.
Yeah, well, we can get us. We're sitting in the parking lot of Trip Sporting Goods.
Actually, it's a good thing.
Yeah, well, we can get us. We're sitting in the parking lot of Trip Sporting Goods here in Dahlonega, one of our sponsors, actually. So we'll go in there and get Daniel to score this thing here in a minute, and I'm gonna post pictures probably Monday, and we'll get this podcast released out. I'm thinking on October 14th.
Nice.
We're gonna try to release on Wednesdays.
The good thing about this deer was none of that meat was wasted because it was sitting in that river and it was cold. So we took it to the processor, and he said, "No, it's all good if you want to go ahead and get it grounded." I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So
cool deal.
Makes it even as icing on the cake.
Yeah, well, that's the reason all of us like to hunt and whatnot is because obviously we want to eat them. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and this has been another episode of the Bucktails Podcast. The Bucktails Podcast, brought to you in part by Trick Sporting Goods in Dahlonega, Georgia.